She had crossed that same stretch of the long gallery 1,000 mornings, and on 1,000 mornings I had watched her without ever once being permitted to look. So when her steps faltered on the morning of the 3rd of October, I knew the wrongness of it before my mind had words for it. A guard learns the rhythm of the people he protects the way a sailor learns the sea. Princess Isolde of Harrogate walked the gallery at 9:15 with her cane tapping a slow, even count, and that count had been my metronome for 4 years. That morning the count broke. 2 taps, a pause too long, then a third tap that landed soft, as though the floor itself had moved out from under it. I should not have turned my head. I was on the cordon line outside the amber door, in full dress, rifle at the shoulder, and the standing order at Harrogate Palace is that a guard on the cordon does not turn for anything short of fire or the king's own voice. But I had already turned. I had turned the way a man turns when he hears his own name called in a crowd, before he can decide whether to. She was perhaps 30 feet from me, beneath the great mullioned window where the autumn light came down in long honey bars across the parquet. She was a small woman made tall by carriage. Princess Isolde was the Queen's elder sister, 61 years old that month, and she stood as though a string ran from the crown of her silver head straight to the vaulted ceiling. She had been standing so my whole life, and the whole life of every man on this detail. The court called her the Iron Lily, and they did not mean it unkindly. She had buried a husband and steered the house of Harrogate through the bad winter of the Regency when the present Queen, Saralind, was still a girl, and she had never once let the realm see her bend. She bent now. It was not a stumble. A stumble is loud and graceless and survivable. This was a slow folding, the way a paper figure folds when the air goes out of the room, her shoulders coming forward and her chin dropping and the cane sliding from her glove to clatter on the parquet with a sound that, in that vaulted silence, was as loud as a dropped sword. Her lady-in-waiting, a half-step behind, gave a small cry and reached too slow, too far, her hands closing on nothing. I broke the cordon. I will not pretend it was a decision. There was no decision in it, no weighing of the standing order against the woman, no thought of the discipline I had spent 11 years building into my bones. There was only the distance, 30 feet of honeyed parquet, and my own boots eating it, and the rifle coming off my shoulder in a motion I had drilled 10,000 times, so that even now, even running, it did not fall. It came into my left hand clean and crossed my body out of the way. And then there was her weight against my arms. I caught her under the shoulders, and behind the knees, the instant before her head would have struck the brass threshold strip set into the floor. I felt how little she weighed. That is the thing I remember most sharply, sharper than the shout that went up behind me, or the lady-in-waiting's gasp, or the clatter of more boots coming. The Iron Lily of Harrogate weighed almost nothing. She weighed like a bundle of dry reeds, like something that had been quietly hollowing out for weeks while we all stood our posts and watched her walk her even count and saw nothing. "Highness," I said, low, close to her ear, the way you speak to someone you are trying to call back from a far place. "Highness, I have you. You're safe. I have you." Her eyes were half open and they were the wrong color, or rather the right color, that pale Harrogate gray, but flat, the way water is flat under cloud, the light gone off the top of it. Her lips moved. No sound came at first, and then a thread of one, so faint I had to read it off the shape of her mouth as much as hear it. "Not the tea," she said. "Don't let them not the tea." I have stood the cordon at 4 state funerals. I have stood through a coronation, through 2 attempted breaches of the forecourt, through one long bad night when a man with a grievance and a knife had to be talked down at the west gate while I held my fire and held my breath. I had thought myself a man who could not be made cold by anything a palace could do. Those 4 words made me cold. "Don't let them," she said again, and her hand, her bare hand, the glove had come off in the fall and was lying somewhere on the parquet behind me, closed on the front of my tunic with a strength that had no business in a body that light. "You, the one who watches, don't let them give it to me again." Then her eyes rolled up white and the grip went slack and she was gone down into the dark. And I knelt there in the broken cordon with the Queen's sister limp in my arms, and her 4 words sitting in my chest like 4 cold stones. Make way! That was Sergeant Holt, my section commander, arriving at a dead run with 2 more of the detail behind him. Make way, the physician's coming. Vane, set her down, gently, gently. What in God's name happened? She collapsed, Sergeant. My voice came out level. 11 years of drill will give you a level voice over almost anything. Crossing the gallery, I caught her before her head struck the threshold. You broke the cordon. I did, Sergeant. He looked at me for one long beat. Holt was a hard man and a fair one, with 26 years in and a face like a closed gate, and in that beat I saw him weigh the standing order against the woman in my arms exactly the way I had not. Then he knelt opposite me and helped me ease her down onto the parquet, her silver head into the cradle of my folded cloak, and he said, quietly, only to me, "Then it's a good thing you did. Hold her steady till the doctor's here." The long gallery filled. It fills fast, a palace, when something cracks the routine, first the household staff, then the undersecretaries, then, faster than any of them, the people you never see until something is wrong. A tall man in a charcoal morning coat came through the gathering crowd with the smooth, parting authority of someone used to being let through, and knelt at the princess's other side, and I knew him by sight. Dr. Caractacus Venn, the royal household's senior physician, the man who held the health of every soul under this roof in his soft pink hands. "Thank you, Corporal," he said, not looking at me, already lifting her wrist, his thumb on the thread of her pulse. "I have her now. You may stand away." I did not stand away. I should have. The order was plain, and it came from a man who outranked me 100 times over in the matter of a fainting woman. But she had said the one who watches, and she had gripped my tunic, and named me as though out of all the palace I was the one she had chosen to tell. And "don't let them give it to me again" was not the sentence of a woman who had simply fainted from her age and the autumn heat. So I knelt where I was, and I held her silver head steady in my folded cloak, and I watched Dr. Caractacus Venn's soft pink hands, and I did not stand away. That was the morning it began, though in the truest sense it had begun weeks before, in a cup of tea I had never thought to look at, in a kindness that wore a physician's coat, in a slow and patient cruelty being worked on a good woman inside the walls I had sworn my whole life to keep. I just did not know it yet. None of us did. But she had handed me the first thread, not the tea. Don't let them give it to me again. And a guard, whatever else he is a man who does not let go of a thread once it is in his hand. My name is Edric Vane, and at the time of which I write I had served 11 years in the King's Guard of the Kingdom of Eldermoor, the last 4 of them inside the walls of Harrogate Palace, on the household detail that stands the inner posts. There is a thing people misunderstand about the ceremonial guard, and I want to set it down plainly before I go on, because the whole of this story turns on it. They look at us, the red tunics, the tall black bearskins, the white gloves, the rifles held at perfect angle, the faces that do not move when a tourist shouts in them or a fool tries to make us laugh, and they think we are statues. They think the stillness is the whole of us. They think a man who can stand 4 hours without shifting his weight, who can let a stranger snap his fingers an inch from his nose and not blink, has trained the man out of himself and left only the post. It is the opposite. The stillness is not the absence of seeing. The stillness is what frees you to see everything. When you are not permitted to turn your head, your eyes learn to take in the whole gallery at once. The gait of every person who crosses it, the angle of every door, the count of every set of footsteps. When you are not permitted to speak, you learn to listen so hard you can hear the difference between a cane tap on a sound floorboard and a cane tap on the one near the 3rd window that has gone a little hollow with age. A guard who has truly mastered his post is not a statue. He is the most awake man in the room precisely because he is the only one who is forbidden to move. That is the discipline. That is the whole secret of it. The restraint is not the cage. The restraint is the lens. And it was the lens that had made me cold when Princess Isolde said asterisk, not the T. Because once she said it, 100 small things I had seen over the past weeks and filed away without weighing. The way you file 1,000 small things a day on a post like mine, came up out of the floor of my memory all at once and arranged themselves into a shape, and the shape was ugly. I had seen her grow slower. Everyone had. We put it to her age, to the cold coming on, to the grief that never quite left her since the old prince her husband died. But I had seen it close. I had seen the even count of her cane stretch out week by week. I had seen her pause, more and more often, at the third window, one gloved hand going to the sill as though to be sure the world would still hold her up. I had seen her, twice, press the back of her hand to her brow in the gesture of a woman fighting off a swimming head, and recover and walk on, and I had thought, she is 61, and the winters are long, and even iron rusts. I had seen, 3 weeks past, a new thing in the morning routine. A small silver tray, carried not by her own long-serving maid but by one of the understewards, brought to the antechamber off the gallery at 8:45 before her walk. On the tray, a single cup covered. I had thought nothing of it. A great lady takes her morning tea. What could be more ordinary than that? But now the word asterisk tea was in the air between us like a struck bell, and I remembered that I had never seen that covered cup before 3 weeks ago, and I remembered who it was that had instituted, with great gentleness and great concern for Her Highness's failing strength, a new morning regimen of restorative tonics. It was the man kneeling across from me now, Dr. Caractacus Ven. Her pulse is thready, but she's breathing well, the physician announced to the gathered crowd in the warm, carrying, reassuring voice of a man who has spent 30 years calming frightened rooms. A simple syncope, a faint. Her Highness has been frail of late, as you all know. I've been treating her for it. The excitement, the warmth of the gallery in the morning sun, nothing to alarm anyone. We'll have her to her rooms and resting in no time. He looked up, and his eyes found the senior steward at the edge of the crowd. Have the litter brought, and clear the gallery, please. Her Highness would not wish to be gawked at. It was all perfectly correct. Every word of it was the word a good physician would say. And I knelt there holding her head, and I felt the wrongness of it crawl up my spine, because a faint from frailty does not make a woman grip a man's tunic and say asterisk, don't let them give it to me again. A faint from frailty has no asterisk them. The litter came. 2 footmen lifted her, careful as if she were spun glass, and Dr. Ven walked at her side with his hand resting on the litter's rail, the very image of devoted care, and the crowd parted to let the sad little procession through. I rose to my feet. My knees had gone stiff. My cloak, when I gathered it up, smelled faintly of her, of lavender, and beneath the lavender something else, something Swedish and chemical and faint that I could not name and did not like. I tucked that smell away in the same place I keep everything. The lens does not throw anything out. Vane, Sergeant Holt, was at my shoulder. The gallery was emptying. Walk with me. We went out through the amber door and into the colonnade, where the morning was bright and cold, and a wind off the river was working at the standards on the gatehouse. Holt stopped where no one could hear us and faced me, and his closed gate face was working at something. You'll be written up, he said. You know that. Breaking a cordon's a breaking of a cordon, no matter the why. The captain will see the report and there'll be a hearing, and I can't stop that, and I won't pretend I'd try. I know it, Sergeant. What I want to know, and here he dropped his voice further and looked at me very steadily, is what she said to you. I saw her mouth moving. I saw her hand on your tunic. A woman in a dead faint doesn't grip a man's tunic, Vane, so you tell me. And tell me straight, because if it's what I think it is, then a write-up is the least of what's about to land on this house. So I told him, the 4 words, not the T. Don't let them give it to me again. You, the one who watches. I told him about the covered cup and the understeward and the tonics Dr. Ven had so kindly instituted, and the smell on my cloak. I told him all of it in the flat level voice of a man making a report, and I watched the closed gate of his face, and I saw it do something I had only seen it do once before in 4 years. I saw it open. "God above," Sergeant Holt said softly, "you think she's being poisoned?" "I think," I said, "that she told me not to let them give it to her again. And I think a man does not get to choose which orders from a member of the royal house he is willing to hear. I think she gave me an order, Sergeant, and I mean to keep it." Holt was quiet a long moment. The wind worked the standards. Below us, across the great forecourt, a knot of tourists pressed to the gates with their phones raised, photographing the changing of the outer guard, knowing nothing of the gallery, nothing of the litter, nothing of the silver head in my cloak. The ordinary world goes on within 10 yards of the extraordinary always, and never knows. "Here is the trouble," Holt said at last. "And I want you to hear all of it before you go charging at anything, because you're a good soldier and a stubborn one, and the second thing'll get you broke before the first thing can save anybody." He held up a thick finger. "1. You have a faint, which the senior physician of this household, a man with 30 years and the king's own trust, has pronounced a simple syncope. That's the official truth as of this hour. Against it you've got 4 words from a woman who was, by every appearance, half-conscious. A hearing will weigh those 2 things, and you know which way the scale tips. A second finger. 2. If you are right, if someone in this house is poisoning the Queen's own sister, then that someone is clever and patient, and has been at it for weeks under all our noses, and is almost certainly not acting alone, and the very last thing you want to do is let them know that a corporal of the guard has the thread. Because a man who would poison a princess slowly will not blink at silencing a corporal quickly. A third finger. 3. You cannot go to the captain with this. Not yet. Captain Aldous Rourke is a fine officer, but he goes by the book, and the book says the physician's word stands. And the moment you make a noise, the cup goes away, the tray changes hands, the smell on your cloak washes out, and whoever's doing this simply waits a month and starts again, and the next time she folds in the gallery there may be no one near enough to catch her." Everything he said was true, and I hated all of it. "Then what?" I said. "I keep her order or I keep the regulations. I can't keep both." "You keep the order," Holt said, surprising me. "But you keep it like a guard, not like a fool, quiet, slow. You gather the way you gather everything on that post, and you don't move till you've got something that'll stand up even to a man who doesn't want it to." He glanced at the gates, the tourists, the bright cold morning. "And you bring me along. I'm not letting you carry this alone, and that's not me being kind, that's me being your sergeant. 2 men see twice what one does. Now," he squared up. "First thing, that cup. Where does the tray come from? Where does it go after? And whose hands does it pass through? You watch tomorrow. You watch like it's the only thing in the world. Can you do that without breaking another cordon?" "Yes, Sergeant." "Then we start tomorrow." He turned to go, then stopped. "Vane, the smell on your cloak, don't wash it." I did not wash it. I folded the cloak inside out, the faint Swedish chemical breath of it sealed away, and I locked it in my kit chest in the guardroom, and that night I lay in my narrow bed in the barracks wing and did not sleep, and I turned the 4 words over and over until they were smooth. Not the tea. Don't let them give it to me again. You, the one who watches. She had known me. In all the years I had stood her gallery and never once been permitted to meet her eye, the iron lily had marked me. The one who watches. She had been waiting, perhaps for weeks, for a morning when her strength failed her near enough to a man she trusted to catch her, so that she could pass him the only thread she had before the dark took her. She had not fainted at my feet by chance. She had fallen toward me on purpose, the way a drowning swimmer turns toward the one boat in the water. I have carried many things in 11 years. That night I learned what it is to be chosen as someone's last hope, and to have no idea yet whether you are equal to it. Morning came gray, the honey light of the day before gone behind river cloud. I took my post on the cordon at the amber door at 8, and I stood, and I watched, And for once in my life I was glad of every hour of drill that had made me able to watch a thing for an hour without seeming to watch it at all. At 8:45 the understeward came. I knew him a little, a soft-footed young man named Pell, new to the household within the year, pleasant and forgettable, the kind of servant who is good at his work precisely because you forget he is there. He carried the small silver tray with the single covered cup, and he carried it from the direction of the service stair that comes up from the kitchens and the physician's dispensary both. He went into the antechamber off the gallery, the little room where Her Highness rested and took her tea before her morning walk. He was inside perhaps 4 minutes. He came out with the tray empty and the cup gone, left within then for her, and he went away down the service stair. But here is the thing the lens caught, the thing I would have missed on any ordinary morning. Pell did not go straight up from the kitchens. He came up the service stair, yes, but he came up it from the wrong landing. I knew that stair. I had walked every inch of the inner palace in 4 years of reliefs and roundabouts. The kitchen lay 2 floors below. The dispensary, Dr. Ven's domain, the locked room where the tonics and the powders and the careful measured doses lived, lay on the half-landing between. And Pell, coming up with the covered cup already made and steaming, had come up past the kitchen landing without pausing, from below the dispensary, which meant the cup had not been brewed in the kitchen at all. It had been made somewhere lower, somewhere I did not yet know. And it had been carried up past the very room where, if a man wished to add something to a cup unseen, he had every powder in the kingdom to hand, and a locked door to do it behind. I filed it. I did not move. Her Highness did not walk the gallery that morning. She was abed, recovering, the household said, under the physician's tender care, and so there was no even count of a cane, and the gallery was the poorer for its silence, and I stood my 4 hours and watched the empty parquet where I had caught her, and I thought, tomorrow I find out where that stair goes down to. That evening I told Holt what I had seen. He listened with his arms folded and his closed-gate face, and when I had done he said only, the lower stair, below the dispensary. What's down there? I don't know, Sergeant. It's not on my rounds. It's Old Palace, the part that backs onto the river side that they don't use much. Then that, said Holt, is where you and I are going to take a quiet walk, off the roster, on our own time. He almost smiled, which on Holt was a thing like a crack in stone. I've been 26 years in this house, Vane, and I've never once had cause to go down those stairs. Funny how a man can serve a place his whole life and never see the cellar of it. Neither of us was smiling by the time we did. We went down on the second night, after the long bells, when the inner palace had gone over to the skeleton watch, and the only men awake were the gate sentries and the 2 of us. We went in plain dark coats over our undress, no red, no bearskins, nothing that would catch a lamp and say *guard. Holt had the key to the service stair door off the night steward's board, a sergeant's privilege, quietly taken and quietly to be returned, and we went down past the kitchen landing, dark and cold and smelling of banked fires, and down past the half-landing where the dispensary door stood, and I will tell you that I have stood the cordon through a knife at the west gate with a steadier heart than I had passing that door, knowing what I believed lived behind it. Below the dispensary the stair grew narrow and the stone grew older, the dressed palace masonry giving way to rougher courses, river damp, the air gone thick and green-smelling. There was a passage at the bottom, low enough that Holt, who is a tall man, had to bow his head, and it ran toward the river side under the old foundations, and at the end of it there was a door. It was a new lock on an old door. That was the first wrong thing. The door was ancient oak, banded with iron gone to rust, the kind of door that had hung there since the first stones of Harrogate were laid, but the lock set into it was bright brass, new, oiled, the screws not yet darkened. Someone had taken an old forgotten room at the bottom of an old forgotten stair and made it private within the last year. Pell's stair, I said, very low. He came up from below the dispensary. He came up from here. Holt tried the lock. It held. He was no breaker of locks, and neither was I. We are men of the front of the house, not the back of it. But Holt knelt and put his eye to the great old keyhole, which the new lock did not fill, and he was still a long moment, and then he rose and stepped back, and his face in the dark was a thing I did not like. "There's a lamp lit in there," he breathed. "Lo, and there's a bench and bottles and a vane, there's a still, a little glass still, the kind an apothecary uses. Someone's brewing in there." He paused. "And there's a chair, facing the bench, with straps on the arms." The cold went all the way through me then. "That's not for tonics," I said. "No," said Holt, "that's not for tonics." We did not break the door. Every instinct in me wanted to put my shoulder to it and have whatever was on the other side out into the lamplight. But Holt's hand was on my arm, hard, and he was right, and I knew he was right. We had a lit lamp and a still and a chair with straps, behind a new lock at the bottom of a forgotten stair, and we had 4 words from a fainting princess, and we had a smell on a folded cloak. We did not have the one thing that would make a hearing believe a corporal over the king's own physician. We did not have proof of what was in the cup. And if we broke that door tonight, then by morning the room would be empty, the still gone, the chair gone, the lock changed, and Dr. Caractacus Venn would stand before the captain with his 30 years and his soft pink hands and his warm carrying voice, and say a corporal and a sergeant broke into a disused cellar in the night and found nothing and dreamed the rest, and the scale would tip the way Holt had said it would tip, and we would be broke, and she would be alone again with no one near enough to catch her. So we went back up the old stair, and past the dispensary door, and past the kitchen landing and out, and Holt locked the service door behind us and returned the key to the night steward's board before the watch changed, and we stood in the cold colonnade with the river damp still in our coats, and we did not speak for a while. "We need the cup," Holt said finally. "Not the room, the cup. We need to take one of those covered cups before it reaches her, untouched, and we need to get into the hands of someone who can say, on paper with their name on it, what's in it. That's the proof. The room only matters once the cup's proved. Get it backwards and we lose." "How do we take the cup without Pell knowing it's gone?" "That," said Holt, "I don't yet know, but I know a man might." "Do you trust me, Vane?" "With my life, Sergeant." "Then trust me with hers and don't move until I tell you. There's someone I have to see. Stand your post tomorrow as if you've forgotten the whole thing ever happened. Can you do that?" I could, and I did, and it was the hardest watch of my life, because the next morning Her Highness walked the gallery again. She came at 9:15, slower than ever. The cane count stretched out so long between taps that I counted my own heartbeats in the gaps. She had been 3 days abed, and the household whispered that the physician had brought her through a bad turn with great skill, and here she was, upright, the iron lily, the string from the crown of her silver head to the vaulted ceiling drawn tight again by sheer will. Her lady-in-waiting hovered, and as she passed the cordon at the amber door, slow as the autumn light, she turned her pale gray eyes, and for the first time in 4 years and for the only time in my life, Princess Isolde of Harrowgate looked directly at me. It was the smallest thing. A guard is not looked at, he is looked past, looked through, the way you look past a pillar. But she looked at me full for the length of one slow breath, and there was no faintness in her eyes now, no flat water under cloud. They were gray and clear and terribly awake, and in them I read, as plain as if she had spoken it across the gallery. I remember what I said. "Are you the one?" I could not nod. I could not speak. I could not so much as blink a yes. The standing order held me as it had held me for 4 years. The cordon, the post, the discipline that does not let a guard answer a princess with so much as the flicker of an eye. So I did the only thing I could do. I straightened, a half-inch, from a stillness already perfect into a stillness more perfect still, the way a soldier comes infinitesimally more to attention when his commander passes, a thing only she, who had walked this gallery 10,000 mornings and knew its every pillar, could possibly have read. And she read it. I saw her read it. The corner of her mouth moved, the smallest fraction, not a smile, nothing a watcher would catch, but I caught it the way she had caught my half-inch. Yes. It said, I am the one. I have you, Highness, as you had me. Hold on. She walked on. The cane tapped its slow, stretched count down the gallery and out of sight. And I stood my post with my heart going like a drum and the whole of my discipline bent, for once in its life, not to the keeping of stillness for its own sake, but to the keeping of a promise made in half-inches to a woman who was being murdered by inches, under the roof we both had given our lives to. That afternoon Sergeant Holt came back from wherever he had gone, and his closed-gate face had a thing behind it I had not seen before, and he said, I've found us our chemist, and I've found us something worse than I thought. Walk with me, Vane. You'd best hear all of it sitting down, only there's nowhere to sit, so brace your knees instead. We walked the long way round the kitchen gardens, where the gardeners had gone in for the evening and the box hedges gave us walls to talk behind. Holt kept his voice low and even and laid it out the way he laid out everything, in order, holding nothing back and adding nothing. The chemist first, he said. There's an apothecary in the lower town, name of Marin Quill, an old woman, retired out of the royal dispensary herself 30 years back before Ven's time. I served her grandson once, pulled him out of a bad business when he was a young guardsman in green, and she's never forgotten it. She'll do me a kindness and keep her mouth shut while she does it. If we can get her a cup, the whole cup, untouched, she can tell us what's in it. She has the means and she has the nose for it. That's our proof when we have it. And the worst thing. Holt stopped walking. He looked out over the dark gardens toward the great bulk of the palace, the lit windows of the household wings, the dark one high up that was Her Highness's. I asked Marin Quill what a clever man would use, he said, if he wanted to take a strong old woman down slow, over weeks, and have it look like nothing but age and frailty and a failing heart. And she didn't even have to think. She said, a thing that thins the blood and slows the heart and steals the strength a little at a time, given small and steady, so the body never sounds the alarm, so it just wears out, the way old bodies do, only faster, and no physician looking for a sudden poison would ever find a sudden poison because there was never one. She named 3 or 4 such things, plants mostly, old knowledge, and then she asked me a question I hadn't thought to ask myself. He turned to me. She asked, who profits when the old woman dies? I had not thought to ask it either. I am a guard. I think in posts and threats and the keeping of a charge. I do not think in the cold arithmetic of inheritance and place. But the moment Holt said it, I felt the ground of the whole thing shift under me, the way it had shifted under Princess Isolde in the gallery, and I understood that I had been seeing only the small wrong, the cup, the room, the physician, and not the great wrong it served. She's the Queen's sister, I said slowly. She's the Dowager Princess. What is there to profit? She holds no throne. No, said Holt, but she holds something Ven doesn't, and a man behind Ven wants very much. Think, Vane, you stand the inner posts, you hear the household. What is Princess Isolde to the king's children? And then I had it, cold and complete. She's their guardian, I said, in the regency clause. If anything were ever to take the queen and the prince consort both, God forbid it, the children, Princess Malin and Prince Joran, would not pass to the council. They'd pass to her, to Isolde. The clause names her. It's been so since the old prince drew it up. It's why she never remarried, never left the house. She stayed to be the wall behind the children. The whole court knows it. The whole court knows it, Holt agreed. And so does whoever wants that wall taken down. Because a guardian of royal children is a guardian of royal power, Vane. Whoever stands behind the throne while those children are small, stands behind the throne. Isolde would never let a soul use those children for an inch of advantage. She'd die first, and everyone knows it, which is exactly why she's in the way. Take her out slow, before the day she might be needed, make it look like an old heart simply failing, and when the clause is reopened to name a new guardian, a more *agreeable guardian, There'll be no iron lily standing in the door. I thought of the chair with the straps in the river-damp room. I thought of the cup carried up past the dispensary. I thought of the smell on my cloak. Then it's not Ven, I said. Not Ven alone. Ven's a physician. He has the skill and the access and the trust, but he has no place near the children, no reach into the Regency clause. He's the hand. There's an arm behind him. There's an arm behind him, said Holt grimly. And I don't know whose yet, and that's the danger of it. Because the hand we can prove, the cup, the chemist, the room. But the arm is someone withstanding enough to reopen a clause of succession and steer it. Someone who will never carry a tray or brew a draft. Someone who, the day this comes apart, will be the first to express his horror that such a thing could happen under the king's roof, and to grieve so very prettily, and to step so very humbly forward to take up poor Isolde's burden for the sake of the dear children. He spat into the box hedge, the only crude thing I ever saw Sergeant Holt do. I've watched men like that for 26 years. I can smell one from across a forecourt, and there's been one across this forecourt for a year now, smiling at the children, and I never once let myself put the name to the smell. He did not say the name. Not then. I understood why. To say it was to step onto ground from which there was no coming back, and Holt was a careful man who did not step until his foot was sure. But I knew, the way you know a storm before it breaks, that there was a name, and that it stood high, and that the two of us, a sergeant and a corporal of the guard, men whose whole trade was to stand still and keep the door, were about to set ourselves against it with nothing but a cup we had not yet stolen and a promise made in half-inches. "What do we do, Sergeant?" I said. "We get the cup," said Holt. "Everything turns on the cup. Without it, we've got a story and they've got 30 years and a clean reputation, and we lose and she dies and they win. With it, with the cup proved in Marin Quill's hand on paper, we've got a thread even the captain can't cut. We get the cup, and then we pull, and we don't stop pulling till the whole black thing comes up out of the floor of this house into the light, and the people who did it stand in that light where the whole realm can see them. And if the arm is too high to reach—" Holt looked at me, and for once there was no closed gate in his face at all, only an old soldier's iron certainty, the thing under the stillness, the thing the tourists at the gate never see. "There is no arm too high to reach," he said, "for a man who is willing to lose everything reaching for it. They count on us not being willing. They've always counted on it. The guard stands still, the guard keeps the door, the guard does what he's told and doesn't ask who profits. That's the wager every one of them makes." He set his jaw. "We're going to lose them that wager, Vane. Now go and sleep, because tomorrow we steal a cup from under the nose of a man who's already murdering by inches, and I'll not have you do it tired." The plan was Holt's, and it was good because it was small. Great schemes fail. Small ones done by men who know their ground succeed. We would not break the room. We would not touch Ven. We would take one thing, one covered cup, on one morning untouched, between the moment it was set down in the antechamber and the moment Her Highness lifted it. And we would put a second cup in its place, an identical cup with plain steeped tea in it, so that nothing would seem to have changed. So that Pell would carry away an empty cup as ever, and Ven would believe his dose delivered as ever, and Her Highness, warned, would drink nothing of either. That last was the part that needed her. We could not warn her with a word. I had no more access to her than the gallery gave me, but Holt had thought it through. Her lady-in-waiting, a steady older woman named Marta Crane, who had served the princess 30 years and loved her, was the one soul near her we might trust, if we dared trust anyone, and Holt judged that we must. "It's a risk," he said. "Every soul we tell is a crack the truth can leak through, but the lady can keep the cup from her lips on the right morning, and we can't, and there's an end to it. I'll speak to Marta Crane. You get me into that antechamber for 90 seconds with no one watching. That's your part." It does not sound like much, 90 seconds in a room. But the antechamber off the long gallery is a room I had never had cause to enter. Behind a door I stood near but did not stand at, in a part of the morning when the gallery was its busiest. And to be in it unseen for 90 seconds I would have to know to the half-minute the comings and goings of 3 under-stewards, 2 footmen, the lady-in-waiting, and Pell with his tray. And I would have to choose the one gap in all of them and trust it and move. So for 3 days I did the thing I do best. I watched. I stood my cordon and I let the whole choreography of the morning play across my eyes, and I learned it. That Pell came at 8:45 and was 4 minutes within. That the footmen laid the gallery fire at 8:30 and were gone by 8:50. That the lady-in-waiting went ahead into the antechamber at 8:50 to ready the princess's shawl and her cane. That there was, between Pell leaving the tray and the lady arriving, a gap of perhaps 3 minutes, in which the cup sat alone in an empty room, and that the only eyes on that room in those 3 minutes were mine, on the cordon, 20 feet away, with my back half to the door. 3 minutes. A gap I could not myself step into, because I could not leave the cordon a second time and live to tell it. But a gap into which another man might step, if I gave him the word that the room was clear and kept the watch while he did. That man was Holt, and the word was a thing we worked out between us that needed no speaking, for I could not speak on the cordon any more than I could nod to a princess. When the room was clear and the gap was open, I would shift my rifle from my right shoulder to my left, a thing a guard may do in the long hours to ease the arm, a thing no one watches, a thing Holt, waiting in the servants' passage behind the antechamber with a teacup of his own under his coat and the steady old lady-in-waiting beside him, would see through the cracked passage door and know to mean asterisk now. We did it on the 4th morning. Pell came at 8:45. I watched him go in, 4 minutes out, the tray empty, away down the service stair from below the dispensary as ever. The footmen were long gone. The gallery moved through its slow, gray choreography. The gap opened, the cup alone in the empty antechamber, the 3 minutes running, and I waited, and I counted the under-stewards out of the gallery one by one, and when the last set of footsteps faded and the only soul in sight was a single tourist guide leading her party past the far end behind the velvet rope, I shifted my rifle from my right shoulder to my left, slow, easy, a guard easing his arm. Through the cracked passage door 30 feet away a shadow moved. Holt, in low, quick for a tall man, the lady-in-waiting screening the inner door. I did not turn my head. I watched the gallery, and I watched it as I had never watched anything, and the 3 minutes ran, and at the count of perhaps 110, within the gap, within it by a hair, the shadow moved back, and the passage door closed, and Sergeant Holt was gone with a covered cup under his coat and another, identical, sitting on the silver tray in his place, and no soul in all the palace the wiser. I shifted my rifle back to my right shoulder. The gap closed. At 8:50 the lady-in-waiting came out calm, carrying the princess's shawl, and went back in, and at 9:15 Princess Isolde walked the gallery, slow, upright, the cane tapping its stretched count, and she did not look at me this time, did not so much as turn her gray eyes, and I understood that this was Marta Crane's doing too, this perfect ordinariness, so that no watcher would ever read a thing. We had the cup. We had it whole and untouched in the hand of a man who knew an old apothecary in the lower town who owed him a kindness and would keep her mouth shut. After a fortnight of standing helpless beside the slow murder of a good woman, we had at last a thread we could pull. That was the false dawn. It is always brightest, the false dawn, just before the trap shows its teeth. Because what neither Holt nor I knew, on that 4th gray morning, was that we had already been seen. Not in the antechamber. Holt's 3 minutes had been clean. We had been seen the night before on the old stair. Pell, it turned out, did not only carry the cup up. He carried other things down late, after the long bells, empty bottles back to the river-damp room to be filled again. And on the night Holt and I had gone down to find the new lock on the old door, Pell had been on the stair above us, frozen in a doorway, and had watched two men in plain dark coats kneel at the door of the secret room and put an eye to the keyhole and go away again without breaking in. He had not known us by face in the dark, but he had marked the way one of us moved, tall, with a particular set to the shoulders that a soft-footed servant who spends his life watching his betters could not fail to file away. And within 2 days, he had matched that set of shoulders to a sergeant of the guard who had begun, most unusually, to take an interest in the lower town and an old retired apothecary. I learned all this later in the unraveling. At the time I knew none of it. At the time, the morning after we took the cup, I came off my watch to find Sergeant Holt gone. Not gone in body, gone in standing. There was a notice on the guardroom board, fresh, in the captain's own clerk's hand. Sergeant Aldous Holt, suspended from all duty pending inquiry into conduct unbecoming, theft of household property, and unauthorized contact with persons outside the palace. And below it, the thing that turned my blood to river water, all members of the section to report any knowledge of the above to Dr. Caractacus Venn, who assists the inquiry at the captain's request. Venn assisting the inquiry, the hand that mixed the cup, set to investigate the theft of the cup. They had not arrested Holt for poisoning a princess. They had arrested him for stealing a teacup, and they had put the poisoner in charge of finding out why. And it was so neat, so clean, so perfectly turned against us, that I understood at once we were facing no clumsy killer but a mind every bit as patient and cold as the slow draft itself. I found Holt that evening, confined to a bare room in the duty wing, a guard on the door who would not meet my eye. They let me in for 5 minutes as a comrade come to commiserate. Holt sat on the cot with his big hands open on his knees and his closed-gate face shut so tight I could barely read it, but his eyes, when they came up to mine, were burning. "The cup," he said the instant the door shut very low. "Did it get to Quill?" "I don't know, Sergeant, you had it." "They took you before." "I gave it to Marta Crane to carry down to the town, before they came for me. It's out of the palace vein. It's at Marin Quill's or it's on its way. They've got me, but they haven't got the cup, and they don't know that, or they'd not be so calm." He gripped my wrist. "Listen to me now, because they'll not let you in again. They think it's me. They think I'm the head of it, and you're nothing, a corporal who broke a cordon for a fainting old woman beneath their notice. That's our one advantage, and it won't last. You are asterisk beneath their notice, asterisk vein. Use it. Get a Quill, get the cup proved, and when it's proved," his grip tightened. "When it's proved, you do not take it to the captain. The captain has Venn at his elbow, you take it higher. You take it to the only door in this whole house that Venn and his arm can't reach behind." "The Queen," I said. "The Queen," said Holt. "Saralind. She loves her sister past all reason, and she is no fool, whatever they think of women on thrones. You get the proof and you get to the Queen, past Venn, past the captain, past the smiling arm whose name I still can't give you, and you put it in her hand. That's the door. There's no other. Now go before they wonder why a corporal sits so long with a suspended sergeant in vain." He let go my wrist. "If they take me to that room, the one with the chair and the straps, if I disappear into an asterisk inquiry and don't come out, you finish it anyway. You promised her. Not me, her. You finish it." They put me out then. The door shut on Sergeant Holt, and I did not see him again for a long while, and I walked back across the dark forecourt with the weight of the whole thing on my single pair of shoulders, exactly as he had said I would, exactly as they had arranged. The sergeant caged, the corporal alone and beneath notice, the cup the only loose thread in a trap otherwise perfectly sprung. But Holt was right about the one thing. They had made a mistake, the patient cold mind and the smiling arm behind it. They had looked at me and seen a statue. They had seen the red tunic and the bearskin and the stillness and the broken cordon, and they had filed me as what the whole world files a guard, a thing that stands, a thing that does not think, a thing beneath notice. They did not know that the stillness is the lens. They did not know that the man they had dismissed had stood 20 feet from their crime every morning for weeks with the most awake eyes in the palace. They did not know that I had already read the choreography of their mornings down to the half-minute, that I knew the lower stair and the new lock and the covered cup in Pell's wrong landing, that I had a sergeant's chemist in the lower town and a sergeant's last order ringing in my ears. They had caged the arm they could see. They had left the lens standing on the cordon. That was their mistake, and I made it cost them everything. I went to Marinquill's 2 nights later, on my own time in plain clothes, by the river path that a guard learns the way, a guard learns all the back ways of the house he keeps. She was a small, fierce old woman with ink-stained fingers and a back room that smelled of 100 dried things, and she had the cup, and she had already done the work, because Marta Crane had told her whose life it touched, and the old woman had not slept until it was done. She did not waste words. She set a single sheet of paper on the bench between us, in her own cramped hand, signed and dated, and she put one ink-stained finger on it. "Your sergeant asked me what a clever man would use," she said. "I'll tell you what a clever man * did use, because it's in that cup and I'd swear to it before the king himself. 3 things mixed fine, a thinning of the blood, a slowing of the heart, and a third I didn't expect, a thing that muddies the mind, makes an old woman forgetful, vague, easy to call frail, easy to set aside." Her black eyes came up to mine. "Whoever made this is no poisoner of the common kind, young man. A common poisoner wants death. This one wanted * decline. This one wanted everyone who loved her to watch her fade and nod and say, 'Ah, the poor lady, her mind's going, her heart's failing. It's only her age,' and to feel no horror, and to suspect no hand, and to let it happen slow, while a place was being cleared. That's not a murder. That's a theft of a life dressed as the course of nature, and it's the cruelest thing I've smelled in 60 years of smelling cruelty." She pushed the paper at me. Take it to whoever can stop it, and God go with you, because the man who made this will not stop himself." I carried that single sheet of paper back along the river path inside my coat, against my chest, and it weighed more than the rifle ever had. I had the proof. I had the thread proved in a chemist's own hand, signed and dated, and I had Holt's last order ringing under it. "You take it higher. You take it to the only door Ven and his arm can't reach behind." The Queen. But how does a corporal of the guard, beneath notice, watched, his sergeant caged on a charge of theft, reach Queen Saralind of Eldermoor past a senior physician who has the captain's ear and a smiling arm whose name he still does not know? You do not walk up to the queen of a realm and put a paper in her hand. There are doors and doors and doors, and at every one a man who might be the arm, and one word in the wrong ear and the cup is dismissed, the chemist discredited, the corporal broken, and Isolde left to fade. I thought on it the whole way back, and the answer when it came was the post itself. I could not reach the Queen. But the Queen came every Sunday to the royal chapel, and to reach the chapel she crossed the stone court, and the stone court was guarded, and the inner cordon of the stone court on a Sunday morning was a post I could request, a quiet post, a comrade's favor, no questions asked, because no one suspends a corporal from standing still in a courtyard. They thought me beneath notice. So let them. A man beneath notice can stand exactly where he chooses in plain sight, and no one will wonder why. There was one thing more. The Queen does not stop for a guard. She passes him as she passes a pillar. To make her stop without a word, without breaking the cordon, without giving Ven or the arm one instant's warning, I would need the one thing in all the world that Saralind of Eldermoor could not pass by. I would need her sister's name in a hand she knew. So before that Sunday I went one last time to Marta Crane, the lady-in-waiting, through Marinquill who carried the word, and I asked her for one thing, a single line in Princess Isolde's own hand that the Queen would know on sight. The princess, warned now, kept abed and frail and watched, understood at once. The line she sent was 4 words, and when I read them I knew she had chosen them on purpose, knew she had handed me the same key she had handed me in the gallery, folded now so the Queen would turn it in the same lock. The one who watches. in her own hand, on a card no bigger than my palm. I tucked it inside the chemist's paper against my chest, and I waited for Sunday. Sunday came clear and cold, the river mist burned off, the standards snapping on the gatehouse. I stood the inner cordon of the stone court at the chapel approach, in full dress, rifle at the shoulder, exactly as a guard should stand, exactly as beneath notice as they believed me. And at 10:30, the chapel bell began and the Sunday procession came across the court. The Queen first, Saralind, tall and grave in dove gray, the Prince Consort Aldrich at her side, and behind them, holding the small hands of the two children, Princess Malin, who was 8, and Prince Joran, who was 10, both scrubbed and solemn in their Sunday best. And walking close behind the children, one hand resting with gentle, proprietary care on Prince Joran's shoulder, close as kin, close as a guardian, close as a man who has already begun to think of himself as the wall behind these children, was a tall lord in a dark morning coat, with a long handsome face and a warm sorrowful smile, a man I knew by sight as I knew every face that crossed my posts. The Lord Chamberlain of the household, the Earl of Ravensmoor, the king's own cousin by marriage, the second highest man under that roof, the man who would chair any council that reopened the Regency clause, the man best placed in all the kingdom to step humbly forward and take up poor failing Isolde's burden for the sake of the dear children. The arm. There he was with his hand on the boy's shoulder, smiling his sorrowful smile, a year of patience behind him and a clear road ahead, needing only one old woman to finish fading. I did not move. The whole storm of it broke over me, and I did not move a hair, because that is the whole of the discipline, that is the lens, and the lens does not blink even when it finally sees the thing it has been hunting. I stood my cordon and I let the procession come, and I waited for the one instant in which the Queen would pass within arm's reach of my post. The instant a guard exists to be unremarkable inside, and as she drew level, grave and gray and not seeing me, I did the one thing in 11 years I had never done and would never do again. I spoke to the Queen. Not loudly. A guard's voice, low, level, pitched to reach exactly one pair of ears and no other in that ringing court. I did not turn my head. I kept my eyes forward and my rifle at the shoulder, and to any watcher I was a statue that had not so much as breathed. But I spoke 4 words, the same 4 she would know. The one who watches. The Queen of Eldermoor stopped. It was the smallest stop, a half-step's hesitation that the procession behind her had to flow around, the kind of pause a great lady might make to settle a thought. But she stopped, and her grave gray eyes, Harrogate gray, her sister's gray, came round and found my face, the first time a queen had ever truly looked at me, and in them was a question so sharp it could have cut the cold air. Those are my sister's words. Where did a guard come by my sister's words? I let my eyes drop once the smallest fraction, to the breast of my tunic where the paper lay, the only gesture I dared, the half-inch language I had learned from Isolde herself, and then forward again. The Queen understood. She was no fool, whatever they thought of women on thrones. She said nothing. She did not break stride again. She moved on into the chapel with the children and the Prince Consort and the smiling Earl of Ravensmoor, and the great doors closed, and I stood my cordon through the whole of the service with my heart going like a war drum, not knowing whether I had saved Isolde or hanged myself and Holt both. When the service ended and the procession came out, a footman I did not know crossed the stone court to my post and stood at my shoulder and said, very low, with his eyes forward as mine were, "When you come off the cordon, corporal, you are to go to the Queen's private cabinet. Alone. By the garden stair. Her Majesty will see no one else, and she has sent the household to luncheon so the cabinet stair will be empty. She said to tell you, bring what you watch over." I came off the cordon at noon. I went by the garden stair, empty as promised, the paper and the little card against my chest, and at the top of it a door opened into a small bright room of books and low autumn light, And there alone stood Queen Saralyn of Eldermoor, and beside her, in a chair by the window, pale and upright and terribly awake, a card-thin shawl about her shoulders and her gray eyes burning, sat Princess Isolde herself, the Iron Lily, the woman I had caught in the gallery, brought in secret up the empty stair by a sister who loved her past all reason. "Corporal Vane," the Queen said, "my sister tells me you caught her when she fell and that you have not let go since. She tells me you are the one who watches." She held out her hand, palm up, steady as the throne itself. "Then show me, Corporal. Show me what you have watched. And know before you do that if it is true, there is no man under this roof too high for me to reach. And if it is false, there is no corner of this kingdom far enough for you to run. Now, put it in my hand." I crossed the room. I knelt not to the order, there was no order, but because the moment asked for it, and I put the chemist's signed paper and the forward card into the Queen's open hand, and I told her everything in the flat level voice of a man making the most important report of his life. The fall, the 4 words, the covered cup, the wrong landing, the lower stair, the new lock, the still, the chair with the straps. Marin Quill and the 3 things mixed fine, the thinning, the slowing, the muddying of the mind. The Regency clause and the guardian it named. Pell the hand, then the mixer, and the arm, the smiling arm with his palm on the boy's shoulder not an hour past, the man best placed in all the realm to take up poor Isolde's burden when at last she faded. The Queen read the chemist's paper. She read it twice, and then she turned to her sister, and for one moment the throne went out of her face entirely, and there was only a woman looking at the sister she had nearly lost by inches, and Princess Isolde reached up her thin hand and the Queen took it, and held it, and neither of them wept, because they were Harrowgate women, and the Iron Lily had taught the younger one too well for that. "They wanted my children," Saralyn said at last, very quietly, and the throne came back into her voice as she said it, cold now, cold as the draught in the cup. "They wanted to clear away the one wall I trusted to stand behind them if I fell, and put their own hand on that wall and use my own claws to do it. And they thought a slow cup and a kind smile would carry it past everyone, past the physician, past the captain, past me." She rose. She was tall, taller than her sister, and when she stood the small bright room seemed to fill with her. "They reckoned every door in this house, every great door, and they were stopped at the last by a corporal on a cordon, because they never once reckoned the man who stands at the door and watches." She looked down at me, still kneeling. "Stand up, Corporal Vane," she said. "You will not kneel again in my house. You have done a thing kings are not always served well enough to have done for them. Now stand up and stand by, because we are going to finish this today, and I want the man who watches to watch the end of it." The Queen of Eldermoor did not move against a poisoner the way a frightened woman would have, with shouts and arrests and the whole house thrown into uproar that would have given the guilty their hour to burn papers and empty rooms. She moved the way her sister had taught her, slow and cold and sure. She did 3 things, and she did them in an order, and I have never since seen power used so cleanly. First, she sent for the captain of the guard, Aldous Rourke, alone, and put the chemist's paper in his hand and let him read it white-faced, and then said only, "You set the man who mixed this in charge of finding out who stole the proof of it. I do not think you knew. I am choosing to believe you did not know. Now you will unknow nothing again. Sergeant Holt is released this hour, his record clean, and you will say to no one why." And Rourke, to his lasting credit, did not bluster or defend the book he had gone by. He went white, and then he went grim, and then he went and let Holt out himself, and stood Holt's own section upon the doors. Second, before a whisper could cross the household, she had Pell taken quietly by 2 of Holt's own men off the service stair, before he could carry one more thing down to the Riverdamp room. They found the room still furnished, the little glass still, the bottles, the bench, the chair with the straps that I have never let myself wonder too long about. Pell, a soft and forgettable young man who had thought himself merely a tray carrier and found himself a murderer's hand, broke before the door of that room had finished closing behind him, and told it all, and named the physician, and named the Lord and signed it. Third, and this she did herself in the open, in front of the assembled household at the evening gathering, because some wrongs must be answered not in a cellar, but in the light where the whole house can see. The Queen of Eldermoor walked the length of the long gallery, the very gallery where her sister had fallen, on the arm of that same sister, the iron lily upright and burning and very much not faded, and stopped before the Earl of Ravensmoor. He smiled his sorrowful smile. He began to say how glad he was, how very glad to see dear Princess Isolde so recovered. "Cousin," the Queen said, and her voice carried the length of the gallery and stopped every other sound in it. "My sister is recovered because a guard caught her when she fell, and would not let go. You will want to know the rest, since you have taken such tender interest in her health this past year." She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Dr. Venn has been taken. Your man Pell has confessed and signed. We have the cup, cousin. We have the cup, and we have what was in it in a hand that will swear to it, and we have the room beneath the dispensary with its little still and its waiting chair. And we have the clause you meant to reopen, which will not now be reopened, save to set in stone that the guardian of my children, if ever God forbid it should fall to anyone, is and remains my sister, the wall you tried so patiently to take down." The smile died on the Earl of Ravensmoor's long, handsome face. I watched it die. I was standing the cordon at the gallery's end, in full dress beneath notice, as I had stood every morning of this whole black business, and I watched the arm I had hunted go gray and small and still, the way Isolde had gone still in my arms, except that there was no one to catch this one, and no one tried. "You reckoned every door," the Queen said, "every great door in my house, and you forgot that I keep men at the small ones. Take him." They took the Earl of Ravensmoor out of the long gallery between two guardsmen, and the household watched him go in a silence I will not insult by calling stunned, for it was deeper than that. It was the silence of good people learning how close a patient cruelty had come, and how nearly it had carried, and what had stopped it. He went to a reckoning before the king's high court in the weeks that followed, he and Venn both, and the realm learned the whole of it, told plainly, the slow cup and the kind smile and the wall they tried to clear away. There was no curiosity left to it, no mystery still withheld. There was only a good woman nearly stolen by inches, and the men who tried it, answering for it in the light. But I am getting ahead of the part that matters most to me, which happened in that small, bright cabinet, before the gallery, before the court, when the Queen first put the chemist's paper down and turned to the man who had been caged for stealing the cup that proved it. They brought Sergeant Holt up the garden stair within the hour of his release, still in his undress, still not quite believing it, and he came into the cabinet and saw the Queen and the Princess both and went rigid with the shock of it, and then he saw me standing by the window, beneath notice no longer, and his closed-gate face did the thing I had seen it do only twice in 4 years. It opened. "You finished it," he said. "We finished it, Sergeant," I said. "You gave me the order, I only kept it." The Queen looked between the two of us, the tall sergeant and the corporal who had stood the cordon, and she understood, the way she understood everything, what it had cost each of us and what it had nearly cost us both. "There is a thing people say of the guard," she said, "that I have heard all my life and never thought to weigh until today. They say you are statues. They say the stillness is the whole of you." She looked at me. My sister knew better. She felt toward the one man in the palace she was sure would see, not because he could move, but because he could not, and so had learned to watch as no moving man ever watches. "I will not forget that lesson, Corporal. This house will not forget it." And it did not. Holt was made up to color sergeant of the household detail before the year turned, with the captain's own commendation, the suspension struck from his record as though it had never been. The young man Pell I will not speak of further, save that the court was just with him, neither more nor less than his part deserved. Dr. Venn and the Earl of Ravensmoor faced the full weight of the realm's law and bore it, and the Regency clause was sealed beyond reopening with the iron lily's name set in it like a stone in a wall, where it belonged. As for me, I was offered advancement and a posting away from the cordon to a place of more honor and less standing, and I asked leave with respect to decline it. I asked to keep my post. The queen looked at me a long moment when I asked it, and then she nodded because she understood that too. So I stand the long gallery still. At 9:15 each morning, Princess Isolde of Harrogate crosses it upright, the cane tapping its even count recovered, the color back in her face, the string drawn tight from the crown of her silver head to the vaulted ceiling, the iron lily that a patient cruelty tried and failed to bend. She does not look at me as she passes. A princess does not look at a guard. He is a pillar, a fixture, a thing that stands. But every morning as she draws level with my cordon at the amber door, the cane pauses the smallest pause, a single tap held a half-beat longer than the rest, a thing no watcher in all the gallery would ever catch. And every morning I answer it the only way I am permitted. I straighten, a half-inch. From a stillness already perfect into a stillness more perfect still. It is the whole of our conversation, hers and mine, and it has not changed in all the years since. I remember, her pause says, I have you still, my half-inch answers. And the count goes on, even and unbroken, down the long honeyed gallery and out of sight, the sound of a good woman walking in a house kept safe, past the man who watches, who caught her, and who did not let go. That is the whole of it. That is what the stillness is for. Not to be a statue. To be the one man awake enough to see the wrong when it comes walking in a kind man's coat with a covered cup, and disciplined enough to hold his place and his fire and his silence until the moment comes to set it right. The restraint is not the cage. The restraint is the lens. And a guard, whatever else he is a man who does not let go of a thread or a falling woman or a kept promise, once it is in his hand.